for joining New Signature's webinar on using the current Microsoft solutions to manage and control the data inside and outside of your organization. Our solution architect, Chris Sheridan, will be presenting, and I'm going to pass it over to him. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar. And as Lindsay said, I'm going to talk a lot today about security in this new modern and mobile world we have, right? How we're going to utilize and how we can utilize the different solutions in the Microsoft Cloud and on-premise to make sure that we are enabling security while not decreasing mobility, right? These two have always been at odds in our environment, particularly in the healthcare space, but in general overall, the more mobile we are, it's always been that perception that we are less secure. So how do we combat that, and then how do we make sure that everyone has access to all the information they need? So let's dive right in. So when we think about our mobile world today, you know, we've got multiple devices, multiple cloud-based offerings, multiple networks, all these different modalities or systems that we may be connecting with both in our personal life as well as in our business life. Well, the one unifying thing at the center of that is the user. Right? They're the one accessing all of this data. And so there's always been this model within security. There's sort of that three layers, right? There's the physical device itself, securing the user and securing what rights and controls and what they have access to, and then securing the content itself and making sure that the content itself is either locked down or protected in some way. And a lot of organizations do an excellent job at securing the device, you know, through various means and offerings over the years. We've done a pretty good job at that. But really, it's the other two where we're lacking, and that's where we're really focused today, is that securing the user and securing the content itself. We'll talk a little bit about the device early on here as we talk about Windows 10 and we talk about Office 2016 and Office 365 and all the various offerings and how those can all come into play inside your organization. All right. So when we think about Windows 10 and we think about the first journey from our user, I like to start from sort of the OS and then work my way up through the productivity applications, and then we'll work our way into the security focused and the cloud-based applications. So that's how we're going to go at this from a flow. So when we think about it from a Windows 10 perspective, and we go back to looking at Windows 7, you know, 6 years ago when it shipped, it had great security, and it was built around that solid platform for identity protection. Was built around, sorry, I'm just going to advance all of this. There we go. Data protection, threat resistance, device security, all of these things were great. The platform was nice and secure, it was kept up to date, the apps were trusted. Our data protection was there. You know, we could encrypt our hard drive. We had some DLP rules built into it, but really now we've added a lot more. And I give the anecdote. I worked with an organization recently who has very strict compliance and requirements in their industry, and they have this wonderful software application that comes from the regulating body that checks desktops for their compliance, and they try and maintain it, you know, above 90% compliance. No one ever gets to 100, but they try and get to that net high 90s, and they were. And then when they updated to Windows 10, they took one of these boxes and as a test updated it to Windows 10 and ran the same tool. The tool was aware of all the new things you could do in Windows 10. That computer came back as only 50% compliant because of all the new features and functions that could be turned on but weren't yet because they hadn't been configured on that system. So that just goes to show the amount of security and controls, things like credential protection, hashing things on the device, the increases in the performance on BitLocker, integrating it with things like Rights Management Server and Azure AD Premium for multi-factor authentication, right, to move away from passwords. doing things like device guard and hardware-based isolation for making sure, without removing admin rights, making sure that people can install only what I want, so that the environment is locked down, the desktop environment is locked down, uh, so that I can control how people are interacting with it. So again, that device security, with Windows 10 is great, where we're adding all of those new things. And I start with this because, again, device security we've been good at and we can get better at. But what else can we do? Well, when we think about these modern security threats, we want to get better protection on uh, me, regardless of my location, regardless of my device, or regardless of the content I'm connecting to. So being able to protect that corporate data wherever that person is through rights management in the cloud, so that when content is taken out of my control, right? My first challenge to most people say when they secure their desktops is, do you lock the USB ports? And if the answer is no, then you have not secured the desktop, right? You have secured the desktop against certain types of attacks, but what you have not prevented or secured against is either the oops or the internal breach of data, or the accidental breach of data. That's what you have not protected against, because once something leaves that secured environment and goes on to a thumb drive, right? Is that thumb drive required to be encrypted? Even if it is required to be encrypted, how often does the password expire on it? Are you protecting the content itself on there, right? All of these things that are very key to making sure that we don't have data breaches and we don't have data loss. So when we think about that continuous innovation, this really is the change inside of Microsoft. So when we think about that, the key words in this are continuous innovation. When I say innovative tech companies, what companies come to mind? And as most of you are sitting there thinking, you go through the various companies, in your head, and very rarely is Microsoft the first one. Despite spending in the tens of billions of dollars on research and development, they're not at that forefront. Well, why is that? Well, we go back to what we just said a moment ago. Most people are running Windows 7, which is 6 years old. If I handed you an iPhone that was running the OS from 6 years ago, iOS 4 or 5, would you use it? No, you'd update it or you'd get a new one. But yet we do that on our desktop OS. And why is that? It's because the cost in labor and the cost in disruption versus the features and functions we get just weren't there to justify us staying up to date. We want to change that, and we want to make sure we have management choices to keep the device as up to date as possible, to allow less time for security breaches, to keep the environment more protected, and to keep it more updated. So when we think about some of the things we've added for that continuous update, things like adding mobile device management native to Office 365, right? We still have Intune and we still have extra security, but adding mobile device management for organizations who aren't doing an MDM today, you can do things like that. Doing some of those traditional things, are GPOs, but adding even more GPOs, adding more capabilities of what we can do to secure the environment and what settings we can affect inside that environment. When you look at the variables that you can control through Intune, or you look at what you can control through group policy now, it really has ratcheted up so that I can secure and lock down even more of those different policies on the device. And then when we think about reimaging and we think about keeping that device up to date, when we think about Windows 10, we need to understand it's only going to be supported for a year after a release, meaning when a certain rev is out, that rev will be supported for a year. Now, for the large enterprises out there, don't panic too much. There is still the ability to have persistent versions that are supported for embedded devices, or if there's a particular need. Just know that that's a special thing you have to ask for now, that perpetual version. Whereas every other type of device, we want to move towards this, that Patch Tuesday and updating, not upgrading. That was a great phrase a customer early on actually came back at me with, and I've willfully stolen from them, is updating, not upgrading. Upgrading's a bad word now, right? We're not going to upgrade, we're going to update. We've been updating forever, but we're going to continue that update so that we don't have to reimage the machine. We're going to not change the kernel so all your applications should work, knock on wood. I haven't run into a Windows 7 app yet that doesn't work on 10, and keep that capability moving forward so that we can provide new capabilities to the device. And as we discover things, add them to the OS in real time for people. So then we really start getting into some of those new features of 10 that are really key, which is the identity choices and how to connect it to Active Directory and how to connect it to Azure Active Directory to gain those new insights. So Windows 10 fully supports Azure Active Directory, which means by fully supporting it, we can leverage it for things like multi-factor authentication. It means we can utilize all of the controls and access that Azure AD and Azure AD Premium offer for my OS back on the desktop. Again, getting away from just having a password to get into the device in order to make it more secure. So how you're doing your identity management is going to be very, very key. And then integrating this with industry-based solutions, that are out there for all sorts of different spaces in healthcare and otherwise, and how we're integrating with existing solutions that you may have outside the Microsoft stack as well, and having that connection from the OS to our other systems. Okay, so when we think about this, again, really the part to take away from Windows 10 is to understand that it's now fully integrated with Azure Active Directory. We've added all of those, we've kept all of the physical security and improved that, which is great, but now we're starting to look at managing that content with Rights Management Server and starting to manage the identity of the user with Azure AD Premium and tying Windows to these cloud-based services so that we can get away from wipe and replace deployments and do those in-place upgrades and do all of that management and pushing of applications and control to the device, because the user is the central object. Again, going back to GPOs, GPOs should not be assigned to machines anymore, if at all possible, right? We should be assigning them to the user, because then regardless of the device I log into, those GPOs and my security will follow me, right? So thinking about in terms of, how many users have one device anymore? How many users are really only using one system? So we want to expand our reach to all the devices they have, whether it's an iOS device, whether it's a Windows tablet, whether it's an Android device. I need to be able to extend my security through the same tools that I'm used to using. So then now we've started to touch on the cloud, and we started to touch on some of these productivity apps. When we think about Office 365 and that sort of people-centric model that we're moving towards, and I circled here, I'm really focused in on this people-centric and security. When you think about Office 365, we can talk about all the different productivity stuff in it, but let's really lock in, because today we're supposed to be, we're focused on security, how we're going to control and use some of those services I just talked about. So when we think about Customer Lockbox, this is the ability for you to really control access to your data, for you to control that decryption key for your information. Microsoft has built brand new dedicated data centers for utilizing for customers who want to control their own key, if you will. Bring your own key data centers. Both inside of Azure as well as Office 365, so that if you have that security, you can be controlling your environment and be in full control. But when we think about moving beyond that, it's now doing things like threat protection and doing real-time click and check on links, on attachments, on whatever it is that's coming into our organization to make sure that we're not triggering off a virus. When an attachment comes through, that it's being opened in a VM, see if anything malicious happens, because more and more of these advanced threats, the criminals are actually utilizing the actual tools themselves, like legit tools, to do bad things. So it's not malicious code anymore. It's a legit procedure call. It's a legit, PowerShell script, but it's being run on a system from something that shouldn't be doing it, so that we can check those to make sure the attachments are safe, that something's not going to trigger. We can check the links, to make sure that it's not going to run malicious code when we go there and it's a good site. Doing click trace to make sure we know who clicked on what. So if we did get hit with something, being able to track who has it, who went there, so that we can figure out what is happening. And then taking that security into e-discovery, and now taking the new e-discovery tools of simplifying e-discovery so that I can look across all my data sets. I can look across all my email, look across all my SharePoint content, all my IMs if I'm archiving them in my email, and figure out what's going on, figure out what's happening, and do my legal holds and research. But now Microsoft's added the extra piece where it actually applies machine learning to the search. So to go through and do some analytics on that data to say, okay, hey, these 10 emails all are saying the exact same thing. So really, I only need to surface one of them as a primary source of data, as the authoritative source of data, and then the other 9 are just backup, hey, these are all Me Too's. So that way, when I'm doing my legal search, instead of sifting through 1,000 documents, maybe I'm only sifting through a few. So I actually really want to dig into this kind of middle one here when we talk about threat protection, right? E-discovery is a tool that's been around for a long time. People are aware of it, and so Microsoft's made improvements, and people understand, encrypting your own data. But it's really this advanced threat protection that I think is the key, and what's available and what can we do. So let's actually step through that. Let's skip that one. There we go. So when we think about those statistics, when we think about the scariest one I got was when they had a Microsoft security expert come in from their office over in Scotland and give a great talk recently, and 252 days was the median number of days an attacker was inside your network before they were detected. That was the most sobering one. That was one I had not known before that event, and ended up stealing this slide from him, actually. It was 252 days, and that was the most sobering stat. And so the trick is we've got to prevent these. We've got to prevent these attacks. We've got to prevent these internal mistakes before they happen. Because once something's in there, it's very difficult to detect and very difficult to root out. So how do we go about doing that? So the traditional idea was to do all sorts of maybe third-party tools, bring in a bunch of different scanning tools, and the problems with all this were complexity of integrating everything, all the complexity of fine-tuning it, all the false positives. I actually had a call with a customer this morning talking about false positives in their current solution, and how they, it was, if I give you an error list that has 10,000 errors on it, it's pretty much useless because you get analysis paralysis, and oh my God, what do I tackle first? So really designed to protect that perimeter and prevent people from getting in was the traditional way we did it. So now when we look at threat analytics, we want to start identifying those behaviors, start identifying those patterns that are happening inside of our organization. So when you think about credit card companies and how credit cards work, if you're a credit card, you use it in New York City today, and then all of a sudden your credit card's used in Italy 3,000 miles away later that day. The credit card company automatically sends you an alert because they know, hey, your behavior is different. There's no way you could have made that travel time. What's going on? I'm going to flag this as bad, as a bad transaction. Well, advanced threat analytics is going to start doing those same things. Let's detect that person before it comes in. Let's check that link. Let's check that attachment before it gets into my network. And then even once in my network, if a bot starts sending as me from another location, let's start grabbing that location data. Let's start grabbing that other information and learning your behavior so that we can prevent those things from happening or detect them quicker. So again, understanding those behavior analytics, looking at people, looking at their day-to-day behavior. Where do you log in from? You log in every day at 9 a.m. It starts learning the behavior and putting that into its algorithm so then it can spit out, hey, I have detected you've logged in from, 5 different devices today. That seems weird, or that's outside your behavior. Or, if tomorrow, you start to access a corporate resource from 50 different devices, well, that's a red flag for anomalous behavior, and we can alert IT right away that something is going on. So other big key thing in here is, that, it still can give you some false positives. So you're still going to need to do, DPI, packet inspection. You're still going to need to do log analysis, to figure out where, because one of those might be legit and which ones aren't, and figuring out where it's coming from. So you're still going to need some of the other tools in the set, but this is going to be a great tip-off to what's happening. So what are those benefits, right? Early detection. The earlier detection, the better. Prevention is, of course, key with advanced threat protection, but with at least the analytics level, we can figure out what's going on, and it's a system working around the clock to pinpoint suspicious activity in your network to alert you. It also allows Microsoft to help you by allowing them to keep it up to date. This is there's a cloud-based service, so they can keep it up to date and they can keep it as fresh. So as more sophisticated attacks come in, it can help you detect them as they add things to it. When we think about, the pace of upgrades to Office 365 and the Microsoft Cloud, it really is a pretty aggressive pace. The other big key to tie in here is reducing that false positive fatigue. Advanced threat analytics is kind of built around showing you only what's happening. You can always dig in and kind of get more deeper, longer reports, but we really want to try and minimize the false positive and help you fine tune it and make it easier to fine tune. So when you think about those two layers, advanced threat analytics, right, just detecting what's going on, and advanced threat protection, actually blocking the stuff before it comes in, those two combined now with Rights Management Server and the information in Windows 10, now I've protected the environment from multi-factor authentication, so I'm not requiring just a password. I am protecting you from what comes in and out via attachments. I'm now making sure there's no oops by making sure that there's no ill behavior on the desktop. And now we add in the last piece, which is taking Rights Management Server, and hopefully most of you on the call are familiar with Rights Management Server. It's been around for a very long time inside of Microsoft, but now it's offered as part of the cloud. And that key differentiator of moving it to the cloud, I think, has been more beneficial than I realized it was going to be when they initially announced it. And that's because people were gun shy, I would guess is the right word, from using rights protection or rights management in a very aggressive way, because it was, again, mobility and security are the enemy. And the minute I started doing really advanced rights protection on content, if people couldn't get to the network and couldn't authenticate against an encrypted or a password-locked file, then they couldn't get their job done. And it also led to people avoiding the IT offered solutions. So, hey, if everything on the SharePoint site gets encrypted, well, I'm not going to put it there because I don't want my stuff encrypted, because then I can't work on it when I'm at home. So it led to users kind of end-arounding IT and utilizing different solutions. So now by moving it to the cloud and having it accessible globally throughout the Microsoft network, I think allows us to get a lot more aggressive in what we're encrypting and when. Doing things like initiating an encryption on a download action for a file from our OneDrive or SharePoint, so that, hey, if you're accessing it in my SharePoint site, we've authenticated here, so yeah, you can open it up in the browser. Oh, you want to take it locally? Well, now I need to encrypt the file and give it a time to live of 7 days because I can't allow that content to walk. So when we think about combining these three, rights protection, threat analytics, and Windows 10, that leads to a better environment. So again, speed, when we think about just Microsoft security in general, right? When we say it's fast, not only is it fast to create these rules, but now we're giving you a single tool or single portal we're migrating toward to giving you control over that entire environment, to giving you control over everything going on. You can log into your Office 365 portal and manage rights management and manage your GPOs through your Azure portal and manage your advanced threat analytics through your portal, so that now you can be at home on your iPad and open up a browser and be able to manage the security of your environment and have it right at your fingertips, right? And giving by having a cloud-based, being able to keep it up to date, being able to keep it ahead. Microsoft spends a lot of time and energy in preventing hacks and preventing attacks. Microsoft is second only to the U.S. government for object of external attacks. Right? Microsoft knows how to do security. They know how to do it very well. But now, by moving it to the cloud, we can keep it up to date. And again, that's been the problem with any of the on-premise solutions we've used in the past, is we've allowed them to get out of date. And again, that clear information, being able to tie this to things like Power BI or Delve Analytics, so that I can start getting information on my users' behavior. Delve Analytics will tell me, how often people are logging in, what sites are they logging into, what services are they using, how many people are doing video calls, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Being able to get that analytics on what your users are doing, on what's happening, and be able to take this data and tie it to Power BI to get some really great analytics on that data as to what's happening. And again, raising those flags only when needed. So again, key features, just make sure you understand mobility is the key, right? Mobility, mobility, mobility. How am I authorizing my users to be mobile? How am I authorizing them to get access to their content and controlling who they are? So with that, I actually want to open it up to Q&A early on this one today, because I'm hopeful, we've got some good questions. So we're going to go to the Q&A tab here. So again, down at the bottom here, you get this Q&A tab. If there are questions, feel free to put them in. I'm going to talk about some of them. I know Lindsay and Dave have been diligently answering questions, but as you have them, definitely please post them in the Q&A window about security. Each of these areas, I could do a 4-hour presentation on each of the really 3 areas we covered today, right? Windows 10 security, rights management, and sort of the enterprise mobility suite, as well as advanced threat analytics and protection. But it's really hard to, in a short webinar, dive into each one of those things. And I've found that most people didn't even know some of this stuff existed prior to some of the other events we've done. And so that's the key. Hopefully we've exposed you to that these are there, but I'm interested in what questions are out there. Okay, not seeing a ton in there. So we will be providing a copy of the slide deck. And really, the deep dive on all of these, the deep dive into how to set these up, the deep dive into, what are the concerns, things like how many rights management policies are too many, right? Because or how do I apply these at the transport layer when I create these RMS rules on my Exchange environment? How many is too many? What's the right order? What are those things that are there out of the box? Things like PCI compliance, which is pre-built into Exchange or some other solutions out there, and figuring out how to make use of those. So I'm not seeing a ton of questions, so I might give you back some time on your day. Definitely feel free to reach out if you have questions. I'll hang around for a little bit, and feel free to post anything in the Q&A window. Hopefully you've seen a little into how some of the new modern security apps and some of the new things Microsoft has available, and hopefully if you have follow-up questions, you reach out, and we're happy to help.
Yep, and thank you so much for your time today. Again, you will get the presentation recording sent to you in the follow-up mail. If you do have any questions whatsoever and didn't want to ask them here, or something comes up after, do feel free to email any of us. I know you have the direct email coming from New Signature surrounding the events. You can respond to that, and we will get your questions over to Chris or anyone else that they pertain to. Thank you so much for your time, and have a good day.